Hey everybody, Cody Menz here. I have a video for you for the AltProto AMX 30. This is a tier 8 medium premium French medium tank that's going to be the marathon tank for kind of the fall slash winter 2021 season here that they do basically between Thanksgiving and then holiday ops. Yeah, this tank, I know some people were a little disappointed, I guess, to see this, thinking that it's kind of like a just run-of-the-mill tank. I'm going to do a quick little breakdown of this and then hopefully get an okay battle here. After a little breakdown, we'll see. I try to do these kind of with one take, so yeah, we'll see if we get a good battle. In any event, though, what about this tank? So first thing with crew training, this thing is set up similar to the AMX 30 and the AMX 30B, so not necessarily your typical French medium tanks. It does share that crew setup, however, compared to your Batchat, like Char Future, Batchat 25 AP, Lorraine, you don't have the same crew setup, so that's somewhat of an issue if you don't have an AMX 30 crew. Also, has 4 crew, much like the M4A1 Rev. So that's one issue potentially, but it does match some of the Frenchies. Otherwise, though, so getting into the stats here, this tank is actually pretty good. It's different without being, like, I don't think it's broken, it's not overpowered or anything. It's a different take, and it fits with the AMX 30 French tanks, which I still feel like it's a little strange they chose this to be the marathon tank. But it's a solid tank. It's just, I feel like popularity wise, it's kind of weird to choose one that kind of fits with tanks that, aren't really, featured in the French tech tree, really anymore. It's not like this the main Batchat, medium line. In any event, though, what about this tank? So 300 damage per shot. It's actually okay for a tier 8 medium. Not best in class, but it's above average. I have some tanks that are, I feel like, the closest comparisons to this. I feel like the Lansen C is actually the closest. However, one thing to note is the AltProto AMX 30 has really good penetration for a medium, especially for the higher alpha ones. You actually have really good pen for the premium round as well. Shell velocity is great, not only on the premium, but also the standard round. And also one thing to note is the HE round has 1,000 meters per second, which is actually really good. HE does 400 damage per shot. Pen's a little low at 50 meters, but it's actually a pretty fast HE round, which is pretty interesting. Gun depression is actually fan-freaking-tastic. 11 degrees of gun depression is great. Gun elevation's a little low though, so it's kind of a theme with a lot of French tanks actually. Just something to note, when you're having to point up, you can't point up as much as most other tanks. Aiming time's okay, it's nothing crazy. Accuracy is actually really good, for a tier 8 medium like this with alpha. 0.35 is not going to win any awards, but it's also, not bad, if you ask me. The one thing to note with this tank, though, is the DPM. It is a little low. It's even lower than the TL1 LPC, which sits fairly low for a tier 8 medium tank. That's definitely going to be the main thing that people focus on and try to beat this tank down, is your DPM is low. Helps, putting equipment on to help that. I personally don't use food, but I know a lot of people will probably push that as well to kind of help get that DPM up. But that's your main kind of like the kryptonite downside of this tank, is your DPM's a little lower. So you don't want to get into like brawls and stuff like that. You want to kind of play slow, methodical, hold down, use your gun depression. Whole armor, not super thick, but it is really bouncy. You can ricochet quite easily, especially with your gun depression. Even the sides can be a little bouncy if it's not a 120 millimeter plus gun, with it being 40 millimeters on the side. For a lot of it, you don't want to get overmatched, but for the most part, this thing's pretty bouncy. Heat, however, will not ricochet and basically bounce off, because while it is bouncy, heat will still tear you to shreds though. Turret armor, surprisingly, so we'll get to that, is actually decent on the mantlet. You're not going to be bouncing any JPZ 100s, but it's actually a pretty big mantlet, and it can bounce quite a few things, unless they're shooting like premium APCR, or it's like a tier 9 TD, tier 10 tank, like shooting you in the mantlet, then it could PEM you pretty easy. Otherwise though, really fast tank, much like most other French tanks, and as noted here, even against like the Lansen, which is a really mobile tank, that's kind of capped off with that low top speed of 50. This tank is really fast. Terrain resistances aren't terrible either, and you know, for a harder hitting tier 8 medium, you know, when it comes to the single shot tanks, because I know there are auto loaders out there too, this tank's actually really quick, so that's really a nice feature. Traverse speed's a little low though, so keep that in mind, because you are going to be turning a little bit slower when it comes to being as fast as you are. And also, so your camo's just kind of okay, it's nothing terrific, and your V range at 380 is a little low too. But then again, it is in line with these others, but the TL1 LPC stands out, but it's definitely not, you know, top of a tier 8 medium for V range. Overall though, so let's pop into a battle, see what we get. The class for this is a sniping medium tank, you know, for what Wargaming labels it as. And, you know, for the most part, you know, the equipment I have on this, you'll note that I don't have very good V range. I also don't have the best crew in the world either. I'm just using standard equipment and stuff. I went with vents and then a vertical stabilizer and a rammer to kind of help with the DPM a little bit. And a vertical stabilizer is kind of a necessity because your on the move accuracy, while the soft stats aren't terrible, you do actually have this weird value for your turret traverse penalty, which is 0.2, which is actually pretty bad. So moving your turret is actually, you're getting a pretty large penalty when it comes to the bloom. Moving your hull, not so much. You don't have as much of a bloom, like a penalty for moving that. So that's something to keep in mind when you're playing this tank, you know, that you could have some difficulties with accuracy while moving around, especially if you're not using a vertical stabilizer. So I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to push out here and see what the hell happens, which is, you know, probably what you shouldn't do in this tank, given a low DPM, but I'm going to roll the dice here, considering that it's Berlin and I'm top tier. But, you know, kind of knowing the stats of this tank, I'm a little bit lacking on the V range with my setup. This could work pretty well, you know, dropping the vents and going with optics. Or, you know, if you don't mind having that low DPM, you know, you could drop the rammer, but then your DPM does suffer quite a bit. It's just kind of a tank I feel like when it comes to equipment, the best loadout is, you know, kind of going to be bounty or bond oriented, because you don't have to worry about the bonus slots. And kind of going with basically bounty or bond, and then like a vertical stabilizer, rammer, optics. Because given the gun depression and the gun, it really suits well, I feel like, for like mid-range, kind of hold down, dealing some damage, you know, while using your really good pen, decent accuracy to kind of, you know, make some headway. Because the mantlet on this does cover quite a bit of the tank, and visually you'll see, so those edges that are kind of gray, you know, where that fabric's over, actually that is not very strong. You can get pen there. You know, it is a little bouncy, but it's not very thick. The mantlet itself is the strong part. However, that fabric, which a lot of people visually probably won't aim at, you can get penned on. So you do have to keep that in mind, where you know, your tank isn't invulnerable while it's hold down. So, you know, just keep that in the back of your head. I was kind of hoping that the enemy would kind of press up there, which I was sorely mistaken. But, you know, given that this is a marathon, you know, I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, is this tank worth it? So, ultimately, it's going to kind of come down to, like, most marathons, you know, it makes sense if you can get like a 60% discount typically to pick the tank up, you know, because, you know, you get a pretty good discount on it. So it's my fault, I missed that. Or, you know, if you can get it cheaper for free stuff, like awesome, you know, with it happening, you know, just, you know, right around Thanksgiving, you know, holiday weekend, and then, you know, maybe a little bit extra time, you know, it's possible you could definitely, you know, get a pretty good deal on this. Which, go figure, I forgot how to aim all of a sudden. You know, the one thing to note though, so like this tank being, you know, AltProto AMX 30, as the name suggests, you know, kind of being a mini version of the tier 9 and tier 10, you know, AMX 30s, it's kind of a different tank for France, you know, especially being featured in, you know, Wargaming's kind of like keystone marathon, you know, the fall here. And when it comes to like crew training, you know, you can mishmash your crews together, but it's definitely a little strange, you know, featuring a tank that this isn't really like, yeah, you don't really think French tank. You know, it feels more like you're playing kind of like an American or like a British medium a lot of times. But yeah, it's just something to, I guess, keep in the back of your head, you know, just in case you're kind of going into this thinking that you're playing something or going to be getting something a little bit more French oriented. Oh, I was lucky to pull back from that. Say my team's down here. The V range definitely hurts me a little bit, having kind of not focused on that. But, you know, while the DPM is a bit lower, you know, 200-300, I would say on average compared to most tanks, it's also, yeah, it's not always the end of the world having somewhat lower DPM, given that a lot of times you'll find tier 8 mediums kind of struggling with accuracy and penetration without shooting premium. You know, this tank having that higher base pen, you know, with your standard round, and even having a really good premium APCR round, having that somewhat, you know, longer reload, lower DPM, sometimes, you know, you still might be churning out the same amount of damage overall effectively, you know, landing your shots as long as you're actually placing them and, you know, shooting things that you have a chance to penetrate. But you don't feel inclined to, you know, spam premium out of this thing like you do, say, if you're playing a M26 Pershing, or even sometimes like a Lansen C, you know, that has that, you know, lower base pen. So that's one of the nice features of this thing, is it is a marathon tank, and a you know, potentially you can get it for free or very cheap. But even on top of that, playing this tank, it's fairly straightforward, and it's kind of, you know, I feel like pretty easy and cheap to play, because you're not feeling like you need to spam premium rounds out of it, you know, to be competitive. Albeit, as you see here, if you don't know how to aim and you keep shooting the dirt for half the battle, then, you know, you're gonna be in a little bit of trouble, like myself. definitely not helping my team here, you know, with hitting these easy shots that I keep giving up. I think that was the third shot of the battle that I shot into the dirt. So I can't blame everything on RNG, unfortunately. Hey, Super Hellcat. Oh my god, I just shot him under the frickin' track. Even that's on me. I shot him too low and didn't do any damage. So anyway, that's wonderful, and I'm about to get bereft, and I'm gonna die. So yeah, meep, I suck. But you know, overall though, you know, while this battle wasn't anything fantastic, mainly due to user error, do I think this tank's worth it? Now that's the difficult thing. Like, is this like a must-have, like, you know, say the tank that just killed me, Brest, which is one of the better tier 8 premiums and was also a marathon tank, is definitely not on that level, but it's a solid tier 8 medium. And then, like I was saying, for a lot of people, like, it is pretty straightforward, cheap, easy to play. And it's actually really well balanced, but it definitely has some quirks, with the crew setup, if you don't have those AMX 30s. And also, overall, while I think it's a pretty good tank, it's definitely not, one of the better ones, at tier 8, given that, you have the somewhat broken, not completely overpowered, but broken, like, say, Baresks and Progettos, Skoda T56s, and then you have your perfectly capable tanks, say, like we're watching the Patriot here. Also the AltProto, I think, is a, pretty good tank. The Renegade and, like, those other tanks that are solid tier 8 premiums, but they're not necessarily, like, the strongest performers, only because there's those outliers that kind of stick out like a sore thumb when it comes to, like, if you're making a decision. But the tank's perfectly capable, and worth getting, if you can get it for a fair deal, or if you have a ton of time for the marathon to actually get it for free, is definitely worth that. And it's definitely a solid pick overall, but it's definitely an interesting, I guess, choice, Wargaming went with, because it's not necessarily, I guess, the most interesting, tank out there. I'm going to fly over there with my, really crappy video skills here. But, at the end of the day, statistically, the tank, albeit the DPM is the main hurdle you got to get over, the rest of the tank, it's pretty good. Like, if you're looking at, so if you're a stickler about DPM, it's not the end all be all. Yes, it's important, but take the TL1 LPC and even the CS that has slightly low DPM for their tiers, but specifically the TL1, you get a little bit extra V range versus that. 2 degrees of extra gun depression, albeit turret armor a little bit better on the TL1. But you do have that really nice 232 for the base pen, and also you have a better, so you have an APCR, I believe. Yeah, this is a heat round, so albeit this has about 20 more millimeters of pen for a heat, you do have a pretty good APCR round instead. But overall, like, this tank, it's balanced. It's a good tank. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just whether or not, I guess, it's worth it, for you going after it. Is definitely worth picking up for the discount, especially if you can get it for free. But otherwise, just for, like, a run-of-the-mill battle here on a loss, like, we ended up, just netting, what, 54,000 end all be all, albeit with, never mind, you got some extra bonuses and stuff here, but, so fail. But overall, it seems like it's going to be like a consistent earner, credit earner, just because of the necessity, or I guess not the necessity, of having to shoot premium. Like, I had set up with 20, but I feel like you could actually tone that down a bit and just keep a little bit until you unlock field mods for if you're in, like, a tier 9 and 10 battle. But anyway, thanks again for watching this. I'm going to stop babbling. And, hopefully you enjoyed this video and it helped you out with your decision on whether to go hard for this tank or kind of cruise to a little discount, or, maybe not pick it up at all. Thanks for watching and have a good one. See ya.